Now, our theme for today's Lunch and Learn is on hygiene poverty, which is often a really invisible form of poverty. And we're absolutely delighted to have the Reverend Nick Mottershead with us today. So Nick is the priest in charge at Holy Sepulchre in the City of London. And I actually first met Nick about just over a year ago when my first month in role, when I was desperately looking for a church to host the relaunch of our clergy hosting scheme. And Nick very kindly offered to host us. And since then, I've got to know him and his team a bit more, and just their passion for social action and the ways that they outwork that in so many different ways. So thank you, Nick, for being with us here today. So just one of those ways that they support is a partnership that they have with the Hygiene Bank, and that's a national charity which is focused on ending hygiene poverty. So we asked Nick if he would come along today and share a little bit about their journey in this partnership with the Hygiene Bank and how our churches and school communities can also get involved in helping to bring an end to hygiene poverty. So just in terms of the structure of our session today, so we'll hear from Nick, and we would love during this time for you to post any questions that you have in the chat or any comments. And then after Nick has shared with us, then we'll have a time for Q&A at the end, so we can address those questions during that time. So I'm going to hand over to Nick now. And Nick, thank you for being with us today.
Patty, thank you so much. And genuinely, thank you to all in the Compassionate Communities team. You are like amazing, and, you know, supporting us, encouraging us, praying for us, and creating opportunities like this. I mean, genuinely, you guys are fabulous. And, you know, I couldn't thank you enough for all that you do, genuinely. Just to say, so I'm the priest in charge at Holy Sepulchre. I've been here 2 years. For those who don't know me, I'm also a city worker. And that has a relevance, I believe, to why I do things that I do, in the idea that at times the city can be a tough place, and doing good can make you feel good. And I genuinely mean that. And encouraging city workers to get involved in this is partly why I'm very passionate about it, as well as the outcomes that we get. Actually, I see that these two pillars for what we do is we can help the city to be well by joining in doing good, as well as helping the city to recognize that we, for most of the time, if we're in a good season of life, then we should recognize that most city workers are fairly blessed, and we should be actually participating in and joining in with the common good and doing good for those who are significantly in need. And as I say, as part of that, I took on the role 4 years ago to establish the local partner of the Hygiene Bank in the city. So we call the Square Mile Hygiene Bank, and you'll see in some of what I share the coverage that we have across the city and outside it, across a whole range of schools, charities, hostels, and agencies. But perhaps I wanted to start off, if that's all right, Patty, with just a little bit, what is hygiene poverty? And the National Hygiene Bank did some research last year. It's the first research that's really ever been done across the UK into the scale of hygiene poverty. So I will share this with you now. Can you see my slides? And all the slides will be available from Patty if anybody would like them. So fundamentally, you start off with the scale of it. And I don't know what people's expectations are in hygiene poverty, but as you'll see here, and I'm just moving my images around, that's better. You'll see that 3.1 million adults in the UK are affected by hygiene poverty. And, you know, that can mean that you don't have access to soap, don't have access to shaving, don't have access to feminine hygiene products, don't have access to toothpaste or toothbrushes. You know, it's a whole range, and you'll hear a little bit more about, depending on where you are, as to what hygiene poverty can mean. But it's the scale of it which I think has been surprising to everybody when the research came out. 6% of adults in the UK. But then you go into the 21% of people with disabilities. The scale of disproportionate impact of hygiene poverty. 13% of those on lower income. 11% of young people at a time of change in their life. 11% with an ethnic minority background. And this idea of the worker poor, and I'm not entirely sure I like that language necessarily, 5% of adults who are working. And then you get into the scale of well-being access of saying that 50% of those living with hygiene poverty are feeling anxious or depressed. So not only are you suffering the physical aspects, the mental aspects, which then creates even more problems. And again, you'll see as I go through the presentation, just this has enormous impacts across a whole range of how one learns to live, how one lives in dignity, how one actually can absorb education, absorb wellness from others, and receive care becomes more difficult. 61% of those saying it's impacted negatively. 39% of people saying that they avoid seeing a friends. Who of us, when, we'll check our breath, or we'll check, have I come in? Am I a bit smelly? And most of the time, for most of us who are confident, we can probably just about deal with it, but we all struggle. But when we are feeling at our lowest, the time when most people need friends, 40% of those people avoiding their friends when they need them most, 30% avoiding going to social and so not socializing, 32% avoiding family. The safe places that we all need, people are avoiding them. A third feeling lonely and isolated. And then the circle gets completed. You start off being unwell, then you become physically and mentally unwell, then you become physically unwell, which then impacts your mental, and it spirals and gets worse and worse, and we continue to hear worse stories. Trying to get out of it, 1 in 8 then experience problems about getting into interviews. And that's why some of the other charities that we partner with, you'll see, whether those be some of the women's charities about getting you into work, some of the men's charities like Suited and Booted in the city, as an example, who are providing clothing and suits to help people. It's important that it's great that we can provide a suit, but if the person doesn't feel confident in themselves because they feel smelly, if they've not been able to wash, if they've not been able to shave. And so these things, this connectedness is so important, and recognize that we should collaborate with others and work with others, do the things that we can do well, but look to others who can complement what we do. I think for me, that's an enormous part of seeing what we do here and how we can make sure we're working with others. 41% of parents saying their children's mental health has been negatively impacted. And this is where you suddenly realize some of the really sad stories of, children not learning because they're classed as the smelly kid. And actually then they don't want to come in. You've got young girls who aren't coming in because of period poverty. And that period poverty is not just about feminine hygiene products, it's about the education, it's about the modeling of that family unit, so that actually they are prepared to talk about periods. I'll be able to talk about the challenges of it. Why haven't I started? Why haven't, etc. And all of those safe places that we need. If we can't talk about it, if there isn't easy access to feminine hygiene products, we're creating a generation of young people with shame of then not being educated. Children then not participating in hobbies. One of the charities we deal with, one of the amazing charities called Impact Dance, provides dance over in the west part of London to kids, disadvantaged kids. And they came to us and said, hey, they're sweaty or glowing, whatever language one wants to use. And they want to participate, but actually they have no hygiene products. So actually they are coming in not clean. Whereas now what they have, we have a goal of every school, every organization we deal with having a hygiene cupboard, just so they say the schools have stationary cupboards. And actually what we have, there is a sign at the Impact Dance that sort of says, hey, our objective is that cupboard is always empty. grab what you need. This is for you, and we want you to be grabbing what you need. And it's just fabulous, you know, we fill it up regularly to make sure that more of them can dance, more of them can enjoy themselves. You know, we need to be encouraging our children and young people to do the hobbies, not actually preventing them because they're afraid of hygiene poverty. You know, performance in schools being impacted, and barriers to support. You know, sadly, I think we've got to a world where many, still not enough, can feel a little bit more comfortable to go to food banks. We've got a little bit better, but actually the idea of asking for any form of hygiene products is very different. It, you know, as you can see the stats, this is 2-3 times the scale of food poverty in this country with hygiene poverty. And we're just, people are just, you know, the idea of having to disclose that one can't afford deodorant, that one can't afford shampoo, that one doesn't use it, actually, that's even part of where the shame comes from. And also then feeling judged by it at a time when more often than not, the individuals are much more vulnerable. One of the amazing things about the 4 years that I've been involved is just the scale of learning that I've had of many sad facts, really. But I would say, in holding on to, and we must hold on and speak about the scale of hygiene poverty, what we also realize is that actually 1 bar of soap is a month of dignity for somebody. So even if one can't feel that it's too big a problem, it isn't. A bar of soap, shampoo, these small amounts we can each often do. And actually, I think that's the joy that we should hold on to, is that the little things that we can each do relatively easily most of the time, that we can make a difference. But I just share 3 stories. The schools I deal with, one example of a school is a London school that's got 450 pupils. And I said to them, how many, because I always try to ask, you know, what it is you need. And I learned that after a little while, that I thought I knew what people needed. And that was a realization that, you know, it's interesting. I think Jesus always said to people, what is it they need? And first, you know, it's fascinating. Maybe there's something we can learn. Or I should learn, probably. Of those 450 pupils, I said, how many of them are in need of hygiene products? And she goes, 400. And genuinely, I said, you seriously? Did I hear you right? Because when I was in my school, and it wasn't the richest area, there was like 3 out of 100. 400 in a school that looks over at Canary Wharf. And therefore, of those 400 children, you know, you think, okay, what I need to get them is some children's toothbrushes. This is a primary school, so it's just children's stuff. A couple of toothbrushes, a couple of children's toothpaste, and probably a little bit of deodorant and shampoo. And then they go, no. It's the family unit that needs it, because the parents aren't modeling it, because they haven't got the money to do it. So suddenly it's not 400 people that we need to support. It's more like 1,200 or 1,600 that we're supporting of individuals in that family unit. And actually, guess what? You can't just do it as one-off. It's got to be systematic, because that modeling of being clean, that modeling of each day using your toothbrush, wearing deodorant, having soap, needs to be done month after month after month, because it'll take time. And actually, as that takes time, the children start to learn better, which is the most amazing stories I hear. Modern slavery agencies. There are lots of stats, the scale of it. I mean, what was fascinating to me was when I spoke to the agencies, and we work with agencies like Hestia that deal with modern slavery across the city. And you go, well, it's not that big in London, is it really? And they go, oh yeah. And you hear the stories that they can spot it a mile away, in the same way that those who've got children can hear a baby cry and they know what it is. They can spot modern slavery at 100 yards. And then you hear the stats of, you know, this is Hestia supporting over 1,000 individuals with 500 dependent children. You know, it isn't all women. There is a significant proportion of women, but it isn't all anymore, particularly in modern slavery. And you know, your team, I'm sure, know much more about this. And about this, you know, that we're hearing this significant revelation of sexual exploitation. And then what we talk about here is we're getting them a lot of hygiene products, but actually what was, again, a heartbreaking one with one of the agencies that we dealt with, which said, Nick, please don't bother sending us any Tampax. Most of the women we are dealing with have had some form of genital abuse. So we just want pads, please. And you go, so you don't want to mix? Oh no, don't even bother. And you suddenly realize, you know, things that are talked, or rather not talked about, need to be talked about, because we can address, at least offer some of these individuals dignity, but obviously there's a greater cultural change. There's greater awareness needed to be done. There's greater investment needed to protect these individuals. We can do what we do, but for me, again, another learning of this is just the scale of this that's happening on our doorstep. And then the third one, as another example, is the adults and children escaping crisis. Again, there are two that we deal with. We deal with Medale Trust and Hestia. And Hestia, again, the scale of people who are escaping into hostels or safe houses, depending on the situation. And then I hear stories along the line from them, is that within those first 3 days, if the individual doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel welcome, doesn't feel dignity, they'll go back to what they see as the most welcoming place, the place where they were being abused. And so therefore, those first 3 days, if we can get them a hamper of hygiene products that not only has all that they need, but perhaps a few little luxuries in them. And by luxuries, I mean a bit of hair dye or nail clippers. I mean, that's really what we're talking by luxuries, tiny items that actually make enormous difference to that person staying to receive care rather than going back. And actually, that when I asked the question, what it is you need in addition to standard, and they said these 3 items: nail clippers, hair dye, and bicycle pumps. And bicycle pumps normally, because the mother, and it's, as I said, normally a mother who's being escaped, not always, but it invariably is, who's escaping abuse, will grab one thing, the child, and she'll grab the child's bike, and normally the bike pump is lost in the troop. And if the child is happy, there's a good chance the mother will stay to receive the care and safety that's being offered. As we know, if the child isn't happy, the mother's likely to return. And then it's just heartbreaking. So this is, from my perspective, a most wonderful learning, heartbreaking learning, but the most wonderful learning as to what we as a church need to be doing and joining in with others, and making a difference, one bar of soap at a time. Okay, a little bit more about then the Hygiene Bank itself nationally. How does it work, and what is it they do? It was started, I think, about 6 years ago by a lady called poor Lizzie down in Tunbridge Wells, and she'd seen scale of poverty in food banks and realized that that she'd heard some conversations about scale of hygiene need. And so she just started on the side of a food bank, a hygiene poverty, and this thing just spiraled across the country about more hygiene banks being set up. It operates now about 202 volunteer-led projects across the UK. It's all staffed by volunteers, so other than there's just a very small head office now, as just sheerly because of the scale of the projects that they coordinate and the needs that they are helping with. Normally what happens is people will collect or buy products. They get dropped off in local collection boxes. We now, Boots is a main collection, a drop-off point. Boots, though, don't take big drop-offs. And so that's why what we're starting to do now is use some of our churches, and I can share with you more about the work we're doing in the city, to try to make our churches to be part of that infrastructure, which encourages then, or makes it easy for people to be able to do collections in their offices, collections in their homes, and be able to drop them off easily. My job as a volunteer then is that we effectively have to check what's come in, and we do it. Luckily, I don't have to list everything down, but I weigh it in. We will normally then allocate it up to different community partners, and I'll show you who they are And then these packages get delivered or collected by those community partners. And the most wonderful thing for me is it's the community partners, the family liaison officers in the schools, the frontline workers in the agencies or charities who distribute. I don't like the language of the deserving poor. I don't like that working out who has most need. Actually, the frontline workers, they'll know who, whether in a schools, those families that perhaps won't come to the food bank to collect that need to be taken to, and also those who will come to the food bank that need to be helped. And they'll know them because they know the individuals. And I think that's, for me, why I'm so such a supporter of the Hygiene Bank, is that we are enabling those frontline workers. When I was at St. Catherine Cree Church, we started the Homeless Assessment Centre. And I think that was partly what helped me to realize is that these amazing frontline workers who ran the Homeless Assessment Centre were so often dipping into their own pockets to provide some soap or a sandwich for these for the homeless people. And I thought, this is just crazy. I must be able to get you hygiene products. You should not be spending your money, also spending your time. I can't do what you do. You are like amazing, compassionate people. So actually, we started giving them hygiene products, and that just made their life easier. It also made them able to offer more to those homeless people, which meant the homeless people were more recipient to the other things that they did, which meant the homeless people were more recipient to their lives being improved. And so we are, by doing this work, I think there are so many knock-on positives across this whole ecosystem that we are involved with. This is the national charity. It's something around 600 volunteers, 200 projects, 1,200 drop-off points, 1.1 tons, 1.1 million tons, and 2,800 community partners supported. Community partners, schools, agencies, or charities. And then the Square Mile Hygiene Bank that I've been involved with now for 4 years and started. We are particularly focused on collaboration, working together with individuals and corporates. For me, that's super important, of not just trying to make it visible to the individuals, but actually visible to the corporates in the city, to realize that actually you live in a city where people who can see the scale of wealth right in front of their eyes are living in hygiene and all sorts of poverty and abuse and unsafe situations. And actually, we should, as a community, be part of changing this. And for me, there is a big part of this, I believe, is about changing the culture of the city to one that is a safer place, the one that we recognize that we should be joining in with others and making it a better place for all. To date, we've given out 18 tons over the 4 years. I try to track, well, I do track each month, and I put out an impact statement. 600 kilos were given out in March of this year, and that's equating to, I think, was about 600 tote bags full. So it's a good month. Good month. We like that. And just so you're aware, you'll see if you do look at our website, a reference to the generosity campaign. And this is because the Hygiene Bank is very much focused on hygiene products. At times, for example, one of the hotels in the city gave me a load of slightly off-white Egyptian cotton towels and bathrobes. And so I try to do that. I keep very focused on the Hygiene Bank and making sure I've managed the rules that I should be doing. But there are times when there are other goods that we can offer to those in most need. And that's part of offering a few luxuries, part of offering some dignity is we found ways to make sure we can do that in the right way and in a controlled way. These are the community partners that we deal with. You'll see that there are Hestia that deals with adults and children escaping crisis, Medale Trust, women affected by modern slavery, JRS is refugees, Caritas Anchor House is a homeless support agency, DePaul is a homeless and young people support agencies, St. Mungo's deal with a lot of homeless in one of the hostels, Rise Futures is a new one. They teenagers and young people pick them up individually. And it's interesting, I spoke to Rise Futures end of last week, and at times we can forget about the individuals. And they said, oh, I'm dealing with these 3 individuals, Nick, can you help them? I'll send them to you now, Nick. And I think there's something just wonderful about dealing with somebody like that. He says, listen, these 3 individuals, I know them by name, I know what they need, I'm going to send them to you and you can help them. Yeah, those are, yeah. Impact Dance, that's doing some amazing work in their part of London. Lighthouse, I don't know whether you know, having one of the churches up in North London, who are fabulous, you know, and that's an example where they've got a food bank. Well, they do loads of things, actually. They're like one of the big, great churches, and they're doing loads of things. And actually, you know, their food bank works really well, but they often are short of specific hygiene products. And so one of the things that we do, we'll provide them the hygiene products for them to distribute within their food bank. Fern Street is a family center. And then you get surprised that, you know, we have, you know, Bright Start, Islington's Child Services, that we send, you know, enormous amount of hygiene products on a regular basis to enable them to do the fabulous work that they do in the houses that they're visiting and the families that they're visiting. Weavers Adventure Playground, again, Bede, people suffering abuse, Stebburn School, Bygrove School, Mayflower School, St. Luke's School, and a nursery school and a primary school. And one of the things that we have an ambition is that, so we deal roughly about 23 community partners here, which equates to about 5,000 end recipients. My understanding is, talking to the head office, actually there's another 50 community partners on the waiting list, which equates to another 10,000 people on that waiting list. And in talking to the diocese church schools, I then heard there's probably 75 church schools across London who have students and young people living in hygiene poverty. And you think, we could solve that. We could solve it. I'm not into solving it politically. I let other people who have patience and need to take the time to work that out. But actually, we could solve hygiene poverty tomorrow. We'll then need to solve it the next day and the next day and next day. But that's okay. We let everybody else deal with the politics of it. But actually, if we set up the infrastructure and got enough people giving 1 bar of soap, 1 pack of feminine hygiene products, 1 nail clipper, 1 deodorant, we could solve that 10,000 ones straight away. And I think we need to come together more. Just a little bit of coverage across the City of London. This is a picture of London. You can see there's the Thames. We currently deal with 4 Boots drop-off stores: Liverpool Street, Cannon Street, Strand and Covent Garden. And we have 5 drop-off churches. And my objective is to make it as simple as possible for churches to join in if they want to just be a drop-off, in that when their drop-off is full, I'll come and collect it. Really easy. And I'm not saying don't do food banks. The nice thing about hygiene products is that obviously it doesn't have sell-by dates of any significance, and it's actually relatively contained. And you'll see that we have you'll see a picture now of a hygiene box. It's relatively simple, but you can see here we have a whole range of London, and I believe that we will, I hope over the next 12 months, we will increase this, one, because the community partners are out there, but I also believe that we have many compassionate hearts across our churches who want to join in. So as a final piece on getting involved, just donating hygiene products. That's one way. You can drop them off in Boots. Boots struggle to take big boxes of things, but they will take small bags. And, you know, as I said, if all you do is drop off a small bag of hygiene products, a couple of bars of soap, or even when they do a 3 for 2, take the 3 for the price of 2 and drop one of the ones into the hygiene box. Many of the Boots stores now have these boxes like this one here. Sometimes you can encourage your corporate partners or even those attending your church to fill a bag at home, put it in the kitchen, and maybe when you're buying your things, just buy a couple of things and put it in, and then just bring your bag into your church. And as a church, if you don't want to be a permanent drop-off point, we've had churches do one-off campaigns. The St. Paul's Cathedral at Christmas, they do a campaign just for Christmas across their staff, not visitors, just the staff do an amazing campaign. And that's just a Christmas one. And so if there are things like that you want to do, you could just do that. There is a picture online of, we do it in our church at Christmas, where we get people to put hygiene products under the Christmas tree instead of bringing anything else. And that's our thing. You could encourage those local businesses around you to, they can either get a professional, they're £20 for these little boxes, and I'm happy to work out how to get to them to you, or plastic bin, or even just a bag. Collect them up and we work out how we can collect them, and we'll get them dropped off somewhere. Obviously, we have others that give financially, and that's helpful, because sometimes people don't realize that that what's needed, such as hair clippers or nail clippers or hair dye. And sometimes ethnic hair products are really in short supply. And you heard the stats earlier, and it's really, it's very interesting about what products are donated, and actually, and how little of ethnic hair and skin products are donated. And so we often use the money that we've given to ensure that all those that we need have the products that are needed to give them dignity and cleanliness. And there are opportunities to volunteer, to get involved. And if there's not a hygiene partner near you, you could want to set them up, or you could be one to work with one that's already set up, which I hope you might want to think about. And obviously, as we say here, you know, it's a whole range from babies and teens to adults, family units, individual units. Yeah, it's unbelievable the size of need, but also unbelievable what can be done to give the gift of clean and dignity to people through very small amounts. This was something we launched recently, sorry, just as a final one, which is we started doing some corporate volunteering days. And I'm still working through as to what these look like, but this was with M&S, two different teams from M&S, and they want to get involved. And it's quite interesting as to this group of people, these two groups of, actually 3 groups of people that we've had in now. They came in for 4 hours, they got involved in packing a load of things, and they also donated. But we also got, in talking in that bottom left-hand corner, in talking about some of the challenges, we ended up creating a little bit of a safe place where a whole range of matters were discussed. And it has been interesting as to what's coming out from those conversations. You know, not only have we been sharing the knowledge of hygiene poverty, not only have we been sharing the role that the church is playing, I think we were offering also a compassionate heart and a safe place to listening to some stories that I wasn't expecting people to be sharing. And I think there's something wonderful about inviting people into our churches to get involved. And as we all know, when that happens, God's grace can do amazing things to offer people new ways. And I have wonderful thoughts as to where this could lead for many people and the outreach that it offers. So, as I say, there are simple ways about getting involved. There are simple ways, actually, more generally, just saying to local schools or charities, you know, hey, you should not have to live in hygiene poverty. Let's make sure we know. So, you know, my view is every school should have a hygiene cupboard, same as they have a stationery cupboard if there is a need. And if we suddenly find that the need is greater, well, my feeling is it absolutely is greater than we ever think it is. It's much greater than those stats say. And therefore, let's just draw back that curtain. Let's unbury the reality that's out there. And I believe that the generosity of hearts will be revealed and then we can make a difference to even more people's lives. And then there's other opportunities, hold annual campaigns, join in more regularly, or even start a hygiene bank yourself. For me, and I should be cautious about this saying that as a vicar, but it's probably one of the highlights of all that I do. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nick. I think one of the things I particularly loved about what you said was that asking people what they need. I think so often we make assumptions about what we think people need, and I think asking that question is so important. So thank you for talking about that with all the rest of what you've shared there. I just wanted to try and draw out just a little bit more about some of your learnings, your journey with the Hygiene Bank. So in what ways, I mean, you said a little bit there about personally it's been a blessing. In what way has it been a blessing for you as a church community, your partnership with the Hygiene Bank?
Two of the other individuals are Hygiene Bank volunteers. And we all offer different amounts of our time to it. Our curate has a particular relationship with Impact Dance and is regularly getting products to them, and that's been a blessing. And so that relationship with that community partner is significant, actually, and with one or two of the schools. Our operations manager is equally has an involvement with it in a different way with one or two of the partners. And I think that aspect of a church doing visible good, I think in itself is an encouragement. You know, we all feel at times that we do a lot of good. It's not always visible. And I think there is something very positive about joining in with some visible good. And I'm not saying that it's all about that. And just add, I think it's interesting from a faith perspective as well as one's own faith, in that I have so many conversations now, and it often comes about with one of the great things about the Boots relationship is in those donation bins, there are lots of random little luxuries that people have dropped in. And I think that's fascinating about one, that there are those individuals think, oh, that's nice, there's some, you know, some nice makeup or some nice creams. It's not always the own brand type products that we're giving out. And then you won't get it into a debate. And I regularly have this debate with a few people that says, why don't you sell the nice stuff, go and buy a load of cheap stuff and give that to them? And I think there's an interesting debate then, you know, do those people with the least, do they have any right to a few little luxuries in life? Should just luxuries be for the rich? And I think it's the most wonderful thing. And I think it was perhaps the 400 or so Egyptian cotton bathrobes and towels that I was given, that were given out to a bunch of refugees. And I had that big conversation with a lot of people about that. And you think the most wonderful thing, a few luxuries.
Mm-hmm. And it reminds me a little bit of the of when the extravagant gift of oils is given to Jesus, and there's that question of why would you but actually it's that extravagance and luxury for people which is so important.
And then you also get to hear what are luxuries to some people, and then you hear things like a little bit of hair dye and some nail clippers. That's the luxury, that's all I need. And
that's back to asking, isn't it? It's asking people what they need, because all of our needs are different. We're all unique, and what we need is unique. And actually asking that question again is so important, isn't it? Just sort of finally, just moving on to, you've talked a lot in what you've said about how other church and school communities can get involved. I mean, if a church or a school was thinking of setting up a hygiene bank, and we've got a number of, I think it's 5 churches now that have, what would be their sort of next step in terms of doing that?
Depending where you're located, if you actually even just went onto the National Hygiene Bank website, and you can just apply on there. I'm very happy for anybody to email me, of course. You might not, but you might want to, those are the 2 really good routes. Find the National Hygiene Bank. If you go on there and say, I want to be a community partner, I'm a school that needs hygiene products, all of those different things, they will be able to direct you to say, oh, guess what? There's somebody in your area that's either already set up is thinking about setting up. And there is an enormous number of partners all over. There's lots of gaps and they can help you. And one of the great things about the head office is that they've got all the tools that you need to start this off. You know, all the digital assets, all the images that if you wanted some to print off, they can do that. They can help you with that. They can also connect you into often Boots or some of the other big partners. There's some brand partners who will say, I tell you what, we'll get you 3 or 4 packets or boxes of hygiene products. And there are those partnerships. So every now and then I get pallets of products that come to me from the partners. I got some amazing sort of different cream deodorants the other last week that were just wonderful little luxuries that went into some of the bags that one of the brand partners wanted to give. And so there's a whole range of the head office aspects that can make the job easier, and also feel that you're part of something that's supportive, and that's really useful too.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I thought it was so important what you said earlier in terms of, you know, your approach is so based on collaboration and partnerships and all of those community partners, also corporate partners. Is impressive. Just, I mean, from your perspective, obviously this is a huge issue to be praying into, but perhaps maybe just for you at the Square Mile, what things can we be praying for you all as you run the hygiene bank in your context?
I think a couple of things. As I say, I used to use the language of a curtain being drawn back by the pandemic. And I think that's a good language to some extent. But I think there's the language of the hygiene poverty being buried by many. And I think we need to reveal it to make a difference. You know, the scale of modern slavery right on our doorsteps. And I think we need to pray that we will be a cacophony of voices who will speak up about this and not be afraid that we can. I think we have to please pray for an encouragement, because I do believe that there is so many compassionate hearts out there that if once the need is known, many will step forward. But we need to make it known. I think that's my starting point. That please pray for that. And then secondly, that more will join in as that need comes, and that people won't feel overwhelmed by the need and therefore saying it's somebody else's job. Actually, it isn't. It's every one of ours role to care for our neighbor, to care for our other. And as we do that, through God's grace, I think we will find the culture of the city changing. We'll find the culture of our community changing as we find ourselves being bound together, because our needs will get revealed. The mutuality that so often is the case when we get involved in doing good, as coming together. And, for those without a faith, I'm very comfortable where I believe the source of good is, and they might not use the same language as me. But actually, if we can create opportunities for God's grace to pour in through doing good together, we have the huge opportunity for love to be shared and for lives to be made better through a wonderful, loving God who will give us all that we need to do this.
Thank you. And I love what you said earlier as well about that, we are transformed in that process. You shared a lot about what you have learned in terms of, your journey with the hygiene bank, and actually that sort of two-way transformative process. We are changed in that as well, aren't we? And just, you talked a little bit there about the sort of understanding the need and people being able to know, be informed about that, and us to be talking more about that. I'd read the report that you'd said some of the stats from, which is, I think you said the first of its kind. Are there any other resources? We'll share that with people in the email after. Are there any other resources that you would point people towards in terms of if they want to learn more about hygiene poverty in the UK?
Again, the Hygiene Bank national website has a load of references, and they'll connect you to the Roundtree Foundations and all of the different ones. And I think one of the things that I'm finding, and that's why I think it's so helpful, is that the community partners that we're dealing with. So, you know, I'm diving into the relationship with some of the schools, and then it's the schools then will be sharing, and actually it's the schools part of the Hygiene Bank. I get to an understanding what that means. I start working with the Hestia, and you suddenly look at the statistics around modern slavery. And actually and you suddenly realize that there are amazing organizations out there who are doing amazing things. And it may be that we're not called as an individual to support a school, or we might have people within our communities, but we're called to support modern slavery, or we're called to support adults and children escaping crisis. And I think one of the things that you'll see within, say, the Hygiene Bank is when you look at the different groups that they support, you'll see that they're connecting into a lot of the evidence and the research that each of those is doing, as you have on your website. And that's, you know, there is some evidence that's being buried or not being revealed, but actually what's surprising is a lot of it's out there. You've just got to be prepared to scratch away and just draw back that curtain, and then you go, oh.
Thank you, Nick. Before I kind of wrap up and close, was there anything else from your side that you think I've missed in my questions, or that you particularly wanted to share before we close?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to share, and just if anybody's interested in joining in whatever way, and joining in includes prayer by leagues, as we know. So don't in any way say that's all I can offer, because I tell you what, I'll take that every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing those things that we can be praying for you about earlier. Your contact details, I think, are on the presentation that will circulate. So if anybody does want to have a conversation, I think you've said you're happy for people to contact you, which is wonderful.